2016. We've been doing this since 2012. We have Ben Goertzel here, who actually came up with the idea during a Leadership Minds conference as part of Humanity Plus in 2011, I believe. Welcome, Ben. How you doing?
Pretty good, Adam. Good to talk to you again.
Yes. So, yeah, and Ben's been working on some pretty amazing stuff in Hong Kong. It's been a part of Hanson Robotics there, but also working on an AI hedge fund. I don't know how much at liberty you really allowed to speak about that, but in any case, yeah, there's been some pretty interesting developments in AI over the last few months with AlphaGo beating the European Grand Champion. So I just thought I might get your thoughts on that.
Sure, Adam. I think in general, each year is more exciting in the research areas I'm involved in. I mean, in AI, robotics, and longevity, biology, and all over the place. We're just seeing amazing new things happening year after year. I mean, the number of breakthrough research reports in longevity research in the last few months is incredible. This last year, everyone's using CRISPR all of a sudden for gene editing. We see that you're able to now make mice that can live much longer than they would have otherwise, simply by making them flush out old senescent cells. I mean, in my work with Hanson Robotics, we're seeing year after year components get cheaper and cheaper. So a robot that would be extremely expensive, I mean, only for universities or highly wealthy people a few years ago, now you could make as an inexpensive toy even. And we're rolling out now a line of $200 soccer playing robots to be used by universities in Africa. So now even the poorest countries in the world can have research robots to experiment with and teach them to recognize things with their eyes and kick a soccer ball, engage in cooperative activity. I think there's incredible things happening all around. I mean, and as you say, the game of Go finally being played adequately and beyond adequately. I mean, at least world champion level by an AI. That's one of the many exciting breakthroughs we've seen in the last year. And I mean, I discussed computer Go with my son Zarathustra Goertzel a number of times because he was a fairly serious Go player for a number of years, including when he lived in Japan. I mean, not world champion level, but he spent quite some time studying Go and reading Go books. And we talked a bit about the state of computer Go. And I mean, many times we arrived at the conclusion that Go shouldn't be an AGI hard game to beat. I mean, yeah, there's more combinatorial explosions in Go than in chess because on each turn you can put on each turn you can put a piece so many different places on the board. In chess, at each move there's a constrained set of places you can legally go. You're just moving a piece forward or backward or diagonally. I mean, in Go you can place almost anywhere you want. There's just a lot more possibilities to parse through. But even so, it's a 19 by 19 board, and I mean, the number of options on that 19 by 19 board are a lot, but extremely constrained compared to the real world that we live in. And most importantly, it's one context. I mean, it's a bunch of little pieces on a board, whereas for AGI, general intelligence, in the world that we live in, really the hardest part is just contextualizing the problem you're given. And in Go, I mean, in a larger sense, there's one context. You're playing the Go game. You know what the goal is. You know what the relevant history is. It's the history of other Go games. So it seemed to us you should be able to solve Go using some sort of narrow AI technique. And of course, even back then, this was 10 years ago, we used to discuss this. Monte Carlo methods were the best thing there was at Go. So it seemed clear Go was susceptible to narrow AI, and there would be some kind of statistical method to do it. Having said that, actually doing it is a whole other thing, right? And it's very exciting that they've actually made it work. I mean, they've pushed the Monte Carlo statistical approach to Go further and further, putting it together with game tree ideas and deep networks, and they've actually done it, and that's cool. I mean, it's cool, just like Deep Blue is cool, Watson is cool, the Facebook image labeler is cool. I mean, all these recent AI developments are just amazing to see, and so many of these are things that 20 years ago people told me might not happen for hundreds of years. Like 20 years ago, people didn't think AI could recognize people's faces because the human brain has millions of years of evolution and specialized wiring, blah, blah. Now, all of a sudden, every 10-year-old takes for granted that Facebook can label your picture with your name, right? And, chess was so hard, computer could never do it until, yeah, of course a computer can do it. That's boring, right? And so now Go is added to that list of things that not too long ago people were saying would be too hard for computers forever, and now everyone will say it was obvious all along that a computer could do it. Right? So that's one more problem has fallen, and that's cool to see that. I think right now the best computer Go programs appear not able to beat the best human world champions, but to me that's almost a footnote. I mean, I think Google and Facebook as well, it seems. I mean, they have demonstrated the principle that by putting fairly familiar deep learning algorithms together with Monte Carlo approaches and game trees, that you can play Go very well. And I think now that that principle has been demonstrated, getting it to play better and better is a matter of throwing more machines at it and fine-tuning the algorithms. Like, I would be extraordinarily surprised if the approach that has been used by AlphaGo to beat the European champion couldn't also be used to beat the world champion with a bit more hardware and a bit more effort on tuning things. So I think whether it's right now or 2 years from now or 1 year from now, I'm not sure, but I think in essence, Go at the human level is a solved problem. No, we don't know how good humans are at Go compared to the optimal Go player. Maybe not that good. So I mean, in the grand scheme, being better than humans at Go, you might still be a beginner at Go compared to aliens from Alpha Centauri or something. But at least human level Go seems about solved. And I mean, it's interesting from a sociological view, because that was sort of the hardest popular game, right? I mean, it takes 10 years for a human being to become decent at Go, assuming you're studying Go dozens of hours each week. So that's the most difficult game that is played by large numbers of people on the planet. Now a computer can beat it. So that's cool. Like, yay AI, right? That's awesome. Now, the particular
But it's at its footprint moment. I mean,
it's a cool moment.
is there any like difference? Is there any like significant difference between the accomplishments made with like Deep Blue in 1997, the DARPA Grand Challenge in 2005, like
I think
Jeopardy winning it in 2011. I think you've turned off your video accidentally, Pen. I'm not sure if you can rectify that. Yeah, just have a look in the console and see if there's like a video mute.
There's not.
Okay.
I just now muted the video.
Okay. Right.
And now I brought it back. Is it back?
Oh, I can't see you, but maybe others can. In any case, we just push on. Yeah.
It says I'm live, and it shows me my little face in a box, and it does not show the video muted. So
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
maybe the U.S. government didn't like what I was saying.
yeah. And so that instead of like turning off your voice, they turned off your face.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like, okay. So look, we've spoken about at different times. We've spoken about like different things, developments in AI that make people think, that make community think. It's like a little beeping module in the sky. Sputnik made people think. I mean, it wasn't really doing a whole lot, but
Well,
compared to
I,
what they can
I
do
would
now, but
I would say, Adam, as well as being interesting for publicity, there are two big differences you could see between AlphaGo and Deep Blue, or the original IBM Watson. And I say the original IBM Watson because now they've glommed all sorts of extra things onto Watson that weren't there in the first place. I mean, AlphaGo is to a substantial extent a learning system,
hmm,
much larger extent than Deep Blue was a learning system. I mean, Deep Blue had some training in the heuristic evaluation functions, but the crux of Deep Blue was game tree search, which is a cool technique, but not really learning. Whereas, I mean, you have some game tree stuff in AlphaGo and some statistical sampling, but you also have, deep learning neural networks. So we're using learning now, and not just simplistic search. And then
brute force.
the other point is we have a hybrid architecture here. It's not just one AI algorithm or AI paradigm. I mean, you have neural nets, you have Monte Carlo sampling, and you have game tree search. So, I mean, it's not
And
as complex
reinforcement
a
learning.
hybrid as you have in the human mind, or as you have in an AGI architecture like OpenCog or SOAR or ACTAR or MicroPsy or something, but still, it's a hybrid system. So if you wanted to look at what's different architecturally in AlphaGo than in Deep Blue or Watson, it would be a hybrid architecture. And among the things included in the hybrid is a powerful learning algorithm. And I think both of those differences reflect changes going on in the AI world. I mean, now learning is a big thing, and hybridization is becoming a bigger thing. I mean, if you're looking, for example, machine translation, Google is pretty much doing pure statistical translation. But if you look in the academic literature, huge amount of work on hybridizing symbolic and statistical methods, for example, and certainly for my work with Hanson Robotics. I mean, we're using deep learning, we're using symbolic reasoning, we're using computational linguistics. When you're trying to make a robot do stuff, you combine together bits and pieces from all the different AI paradigms that you can, with the goal of just using the best of each paradigm to get things to work. So I think, while AlphaGo itself is a narrow AI achievement, and the particular algorithms in there, I mean, they're not going to be driving your car or controlling a humanoid robot or discovering a new law of physics anytime soon. Still, you can see in AlphaGo the manifestation of some broader trends in the AI world, and those broader trends, if a focus on learning and on hybrid architectures, those broader trends are a big part of what's going to bring us AGI.
So you don't think AlphaGo's the particular combination of AI techniques that have been used to build AlphaGo are not really generalizable outside of games?
Well, I wouldn't say they're not generalizable outside of games necessarily, but they're not generalizable to, say, general scientific discovery or humanoid robot control or something. The thing is, what you're relying on there is the ability to accurately simulate a huge number of scenarios at high speed. So in a game, you can do that. You can accurately simulate billions of possible games at high speed and gather statistics on that. But
Yeah, that's right.
to accurately simulate billions of possible futures for the real world at high speed is insanely more difficult, because we don't have a good simulation model of the real world, and the spectrum of actions other agents can take in the world is is very large and more profoundly unpredictable, right? So the Monte Carlo sampling aspect of something like AlphaGo really only works for something that's game-like, in that you can simulate a huge number of possible futures very quickly and precisely. And so when you get outside that domain, then you say, okay, well, what if we can't simulate these possible futures quickly and precisely, but maybe we can simulate some imprecisely, or we can do some reasoning about what the possible futures might be. But then you're losing the simplicity of that architecture, and you're thick in the middle of AGI, right? So I mean, you're still exploiting the fact that you're in a game where things are fairly well delimited and simulations can be run exactly, and the whole world is known, right? I mean, it's a closed world, whereas the real world is quite open-ended, and it's simulating the real world in detail is very, very hard. I mean, even in relatively simple contexts, like just simulating the environment or the economy, we fail miserably, right? Let alone simulate the whole of reality that's viable to us. I mean, even trying to simulate your wife or your kid is hard. We can't even predict what individual people in our lives are going to do. So, I mean,
do you want to simulate your wife?
Well, she would like that. I mean, she's trying to finish her PhD thesis now. If we made a simulation of her, the simulation could write her thesis for her, and she could go do something more entertaining. So
that'd be kind of awesome. So yeah, look, the thing is, it seems to be doing very well at. Okay, so this AlphaGo can play millions of games a day or more. Human players can play maybe 1,000 games a year, if that. Okay.
Yeah, but we can learn more. We can learn more from each game, and this is
that's true.
This is a common weakness of current supervised machine learning, reinforcement learning, deep learning algorithms. I mean, still, they need a real lot of training examples to learn very much. And I mean, that's how something like Deep Face worked so well to recognize faces in Facebook pages. I mean, Facebook just has a lot of pictures of people because, I mean, since automation is doing most of the work these days, most people are paid to sit at the office and upload pictures into Facebook instead of doing any work. So Facebook has a huge library of pictures, and supervised learning algorithms can recognize faces from that. A human being can look at someone one time and then recognize their face afterwards. I could see someone once, and if I meet them 10 years later, I might still recognize them. No, that also could potentially be done by some clever narrow AI technology. I'm not sure that it couldn't, but it's not what current deep learning algorithms are doing. So I do think that that's another breakthrough to come, is to be able to learn from a small number of examples rather than needing a huge number of examples. And that could be done in a number of different ways, but however you do it, it's going to require a more powerful way of learning generalizations.
Right. Do you think the progress to that stage will be slow, or do you think, just a certain discovery or a few need to be made, and then suddenly we'll be incorporating the speed of computation, speed intelligence with a more generalized approach to learning?
Well, I mean, whether progress is slow or not depends on your point of view. What do you mean by slow? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 5,000 years? I mean, I think I project we will have human level AGI within decades, and could be within 10 years, could be 30 years. I don't think it's going to be 80 years. So being able to learn from one shot or a small number of examples, that will be another milestone on the path to human level AGI. That could happen 2 or 3 years from now. It could happen 10 years from now.
Yeah, so I think David Silver, one of the lead people in the study that Google released at the same time as sort of releasing videos of
Yeah.
it being Fan Hui at Go, said that the search process itself is not really a brute force search. That's his words. He thinks it's something akin to the human imagination. And in the game of Go, we need this incredibly complex, intuitive machinery that we only previously thought would be possible in the human brain. So he's saying that this is what's happening with AlphaGo.
Yeah, I think there's a. I would say, in my own view, there's a lot of poetic license there, and
of course.
I do not agree that what's happening inside AlphaGo closely resembles what happens in the human brain and the human imagination.
Well, he said something akin. So,
Well, I mean, if you set your threshold wide enough, everything is akin to everything else. But I mean, when the human reasons about Go, they're thinking about all sorts of other situations outside the Go board. I mean, about surrounding things and lining up on a line and counting and cornering someone in a corner in the schoolyard. I mean, we can bring a very broad range of imaginations and ideas to a game of Go. Our concept of an obstacle or a boundary is very rich compared to anything you'd get from just studying a bunch of Go games. So, I mean, whether it's better or worse, I doubt that what AlphaGo is doing is much like the human imagination. Of course, there are commonalities. I mean, we're doing a form of hierarchical learning in the human brain. On the other hand, I don't think we are simulating in detail billions of games. I mean, we don't have the capability to go, what if I do this, he does that, I do this, he does that, I do this, he does that. We're not simulating a huge number of games in our unconscious mind. I mean, you could say we're doing probabilistic or heuristic reasoning, which is somehow equivalent to what you get from simulating a lot of games. But I think it's kind of a different process. I mean, large-scale simulation and statistical analysis of all those simulations, I think is really not the same as what the human brain is doing. Whereas the deep learning aspects and kind of shallow search through a game tree are a little more like what the human brain is doing. So, I mean, in my own view, it's not very akin to what the human brain is doing either, unless you look at it from a very high level. It's like what the human brain is doing in the sense that it's learning and it's combining different paradigms of search and learning. And in that very high level, it's akin to what the human brain is doing. But we can't simulate like that. I mean,
no. But I mean, humans aren't the only conceivable form of general intelligence either. I mean, we're a pretty good existence proof of it happening.
no, but that kind of simulation is really only relevant in very small domains, I think. So, I mean, it's a cool ability to have. I mean, I wish I had it, but it's not necessarily useful in the real world. I mean, even if you look at, say, mathematics, which is in a sense an artificial domain, you can't just do that sort of statistical search in math either. I mean, you can't just search all possible mathematical proofs and then take a statistical sample of them or something. I mean, that won't work. You can't use an AlphaGo type approach for automated theorem proving, even though that's in a sense a formal domain as well. So I think some aspects of what they did are specialized only to small closed universes. Some aspects are more generalizable, and I mean that's okay. You know, every practical AI system I've ever built, say our hedge fund idea, which runs using various machine learning and reasoning and linguistics algorithms. I mean, some aspects of that are generalizable and will be useful for more and more general intelligence. Some aspects of that are pretty specialized for time series prediction, and that's what you get when you try to build a real system that does something now. I mean, we don't have a human level AGI yet, so what you can do is take some general purpose components, see how far you get with that, mix in some specialized neuro AI or computer science based components when you need to, and try to get the whole thing to work. And I mean, that's what you have to do if your goal is to get something that does something cool before the next guy, right? And
Mm.
I think it's a reasonable approach. You just don't want to fool yourself that just because you achieved something that humans do in a certain way, that it means your AI is doing things in a similar sort of way. I mean, humans, in many cases, our best trick we can apply is general intelligence. Therefore, we apply general intelligence to a certain problem. If an AI has some other trick in mind, it may solve that problem without general intelligence. And I mean, we do that too. When we can solve a problem without general intelligence, then we will, right? I mean, if we have some specialized capability for solving a problem, great. I mean, a baby doesn't need general intelligence to find its mother's breast, and we don't need much to recognize someone's face. These things are wired into the brain at a certain level, and so
Mhm.
we use our inbuilt wiring for that because it's there. And then when we have to prove a math theorem, we have no inbuilt wiring for that. We didn't evolve for it, so we have to use our general intelligence. So I mean, we use our specialized intelligence tricks whenever we can because it's faster and easier. Then we revert to general intelligence, which is very inefficient and clunky and slow when we don't have a specialized trick, right? And when you're building a system to play Go or predict the stock market or, say, diagnose a disease, I mean, then sometimes you can build a specialized trick that will do part of that job, and there's always pluses and minuses there. I mean, in the case of Go, the thing is you're building in something that's only good for small worlds rather than a big rich world. I mean, in the case of our stock prediction system, our system is pretty general, but it's not going to work for, say, private equity, where most of the data is more qualitative and fuzzy. I mean, the underlying principles could be used to build a system for private equity, but the actual code we have is good for public markets where you have a lot of available data of various sorts, which is directly applicable, and I mean that's the stage we're at. 5 years from now, when you build a practical system, you'll be able to have more general intelligence components in it and rely less on specialized components. And then, 7, 10, 15, 20 years from now, whatever it is, when we get real AGI, then the specialized components will be synthesized on the fly by the AI itself. So they may still be there, but we won't need to build them. And you could say the same with the human brain. I mean, we are wired to recognize human faces pretty well. Only someone pretty experienced with marine biology can distinguish dolphins from each other, right? I mean, eventually you learn to because each one has a different shaped fin and so forth. But that
Mhm.
takes thinking, right? Whereas faces, most people just get immediately. Now, if we had learned to recognize faces rather than being born with it, then we'd have something we could generalize better, and our ability to recognize faces might help us more to recognize dolphins and other things.
Mhm.
As it is, because we're born with the ability to recognize faces, that ability doesn't generalize much. It doesn't help our general intelligence much, but it's still very useful.
Mm. Well, Go's been spoken as the pinnacle of games to beat by a computer. Um,
That's kind of stupid. I mean, the
yeah,
the
well, that's what
game.
people are saying. So, out of all all the
People say a
games,
lot of
which they're
stupid
saying,
things. I mean,
maybe
the
what
thing
we're really
is,
referring to is board games or simple games.
yeah, I
Try,
mean, the
try,
thing
try
is,
and teach you like Go how to win in like a shot put or yeah, how to beat somebody at wrestling. Might be a bit difficult.
oh, I mean, yeah,
Or
man,
triathlon or something. Yeah.
a steamroller can beat you at wrestling, except the rules are biased against it, right?
Well, it depends. Like if the wrestler gets into the driver's seat, then maybe not. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, games are games are a very special domain. I don't think they're much fundamental interest. I mean, games are created to be fun for people, and a game can't be too easy or too hard, or it gets boring, right? So,
Mm,
I mean, games are made not to be too difficult because, I mean, Go is very difficult, but still, I mean, it's
mm,
got to be possible for someone to do something that's fun within not too long, or people will get sick of it. Nobody will play the game, right? So, I mean,
mm.
a game has to have a certain learning curve where you can get better little by little as you play it more and more, because the game was made up purely to entertain people. So, I mean, I think to me, mathematics is a more interesting AI domain. I mean, it's important. If you can solve mathematics, that's really useful. And B, although it is to some degree a human invention, there's a philosophy question there as to the extent to which math was invented versus discovered. I mean, it's not made just to be entertaining to people, right? I mean, a game can't be too hard and nobody will play it. Mathematics is much harder than any game because it's made up not just to be fun for people, right? I mean, and ordinary people don't find it fun. I find it fun, but I mean, it's made up to be interesting and useful, but it doesn't have to be entertaining to the average person. So I mean, when when Google releases a deep learning based automated theorem prover, that's when I'll take my hat off to them, and I will be incredibly impressed because
Right.
that's still a formal system, right? I mean, it's just marked on a piece of paper. It doesn't involve robots or computer vision or anything like that. It's a bunch of little symbols on a piece of paper, but that's incredibly hard. And I mean, pretty much no AI can prove theorems as well as a smart high school student yet. So
Okay.
that's
So what do you think? What sort of signs would you be watching for if you were to think that this was going to happen? Okay. So what sort of
I, I, I,
flags would you be watching for?
I'll be watching for Google to hire PhD students studying automated theorem proving, which is not happening yet. I mean,
Mm,
I think that highlights a weakness in the current deep learning paradigm because mathematics is sort of the definition of a symbolic domain. And I mean, deep learning systems are generally not that good at handling abstract symbolic representations. I mean, you could represent a game like Go symbolically, like the GGP, General Game Playing competition, tries to do that. You have a logic formulation of games, but I mean, generally, you can treat Go almost like pixels on a screen with certain statistical peculiarities to how they're arranged and how they can change over time. So that then purely sub-symbolic methods can be used, but mathematics, it's not going to work that way. I mean, you got to grapple with abstract symbolic representations, and all the triumphs of these big companies at linguistics have been statistical linguistics based. So they've been based on, in essence, looking at a language's sequence of words rather than looking at the grammatical or semantic structures in them. And again, in mathematics,
mm,
that's not going to work. I mean,
mm,
just looking at a math proof as a series of symbols, it's not going to get you as far as looking at n-grams of words or characters. So I mean that on the one extreme, that would really impress me because if you want to deal with a formal domain made up by people, I mean that's the real shit. That's not a game, right? I mean, mathematics is what has brought about all this amazing science and technology advance that we see around us, and that's until you can deal with that, you're not really playing the right game. You're playing a wimpy game. That's the only thing that really interests me.
mm,
On the other hand, if you're not playing games, again, then you shouldn't just be recognizing faces. You got to get perception, action, and learning working all together. I mean, remember Rodney Brooks with subsumption robotics decades ago? He was trying to build a bug, right? We still don't have a fucking cockroach. We still don't have an AI bug. So we can recognize faces because we have a huge number of examples of each person's face online to go from, right? But we still don't have perception, action, and action selection, mapping of the world. We don't have all this working at a very basic level of an insect, let alone say a mouse. And I mean the result is that we still have human beings running around the street doing menial jobs, and robots are mostly just working in factories where they can be in a fixed position and deal with a limited set of tasks, or rolling around on the floor being vacuum cleaners, right? So I mean that's an area that I think we're going to see huge progress in. I mean, theorem proving, well, I would put many trillions of dollars into it if someone were to make me world dictator, which, by the way, I would strongly recommend. But I don't see a huge amount of effort going into that. Although I think that's a wrong focus on the part of society. On the other hand, making autonomous agents in the physical world, I think one of the biggest bottlenecks there is video processing, and that's an area where I think these
one of my biggest bottlenecks too.
Yeah, that's right. You still owe me some AGI videos from like 1992 or something, right?
Yeah, well, I can tell you it's a big time thing.
So I think this is a prediction I would make. We've seen a huge amount of high-profile results on image processing, right? So I mean, during the next 5 years, you're going to see Baidu and Google and Facebook and all these guys. They're going to start applying their deep learning techniques to the humongous video archives, and that's a harder and more interesting problem, right? And it will have many interesting social implications. Because I mean, once you can identify the beginning and end of events in a video and kind of parse a scene in a movie or a home movie, or say a surveillance camera video, parse a scene to see who's there, who's doing what to whom, and exactly what's happening, right? Then all of the video archives in the world become searchable and understandable, which is pretty interesting. I mean, then something like Google Glass or something less creepy looking with a similar functionality could also become incredibly useful, because then that video feed of what's going on around you in the world would actually feed into something understanding everything that was happening. And that, on the other hand, we also have some pretty profound Big Brother possibilities there, because
everybody's then becoming a little brother and sister watching you, and we've got this big silo processing all the events, and somebody's getting notified. But do we get to know about like all the what our friends are up to? Are you more worried about your peers knowing what you're doing every day than Big Brother?
In terms of David Brin's dichotomy of surveillance versus
surveillance,
I mean, I am more comfortable with surveillance, with everyone watching everyone, personally. I think as little as I trust the average human being, I trust the totality of average human beings more than the minuscule percentage of power elites who otherwise would have the sole right to observe everyone in a surveillance scenario. So I would rather see Anonymous release everyone's video feed to everyone than see the U.S., Chinese, and Russian governments have all the data, because I trust those governments even less. I mean, the average people in the world are just kind of stupid and narrow-minded, whereas these large military and government organizations are far more nefarious. I don't personally care if my neighbors look at me. Actually, I have very little desire to spy on my neighbors having sex at night or something. I mean, I think mostly people will find each other very boring and wouldn't bother to spy on each other very much anyway. On the internet right now, the biggest problem is getting people to pay any attention to what you're saying or doing. I mean, I think if we had surveillance where everyone could watch everyone else, what you'd have is a culture of people acting up and trying to get people to pay attention to them will be the problem, not people paying attention to you when you don't want them to.
So, okay, well, let's just say we did get to a stage where an AI, you're talking about like automatic theorem provers, I mean, automated theorem provers, not automatic, right? So, like in a sense, an AI that could actually understand what the equations meant and make sense of them. I mean, by that stage, how much further away do you think singularity might be? If we if we ended up getting there.
Couple minutes, I don't know. I mean, I'd say a few years at most, unless someone slows it down on purpose. I mean, I think that once you can prove theorems, then you can do science and engineering without too much extra work, and you can also do computer programming in mathematical programming languages like Haskell or Agda or whatever. So I mean, I think once you're there to really robust theorem proving, you're doing science, engineering, and programming, and you're pretty much going to be there to some form of AGI. Now, that's not to say you'll have something that can write love songs as well as Frank Sinatra or carry out every possible physical activity in the world that people do. But I mean, combined with all the other advances we have, a very strong theorem prover would be able to help control robots and manage companies and do a lot of other practical things also by hybridizing it with other components. So yeah, I think you wouldn't be too far off from AGI there. I guess my point of mentioning that was more that in my view, putting resources into that would be more useful for AGI than putting resources into game playing, unless you're thinking about publicity, right? Because I mean, playing games is exciting to the average person. It gets a lot of media attention, whereas incremental progress toward theorem proving is less exciting to the average person. I mean, of course, if an AI wins a Fields Medal, is the math equivalent of the Nobel Prize, that would get in the newspaper. But in the end, the average person, they can't play Go either, but they kind of know what it is, right? And the theorem that the AGI proved to win the Fields Medal will be incomprehensible to all but less than 1% of the population. So
Yeah.
for publicity, game playing is probably a better focus. For fundamental progress toward AGI, I'm more interested in theorem proving, and I'm more interested in sort of integrated mobile robotics for making autonomous systems that can move around in the world. So really, in progress in areas like that is what would excite me more. On the other hand, I mean, if I compare to what AI was when I first learned about it in like 1971 or two when I was a kid, I mean, it's astounding what we can do now, right? I mean, you've got self-driving cars in the streets. Every game, no matter how hard, has master level AI players, and major funds are trading billions of dollars using AIs and discoveries of how to diagnose diseases by editing genomes according to patterns determined by AIs. I mean, that's incredible.
Getting done amazing.
Yeah, and so the funny thing is, like, I can see we could be progressing 10 times faster if, as a society, we weren't dispersing our resources on making tastier chocolate, sexier lingerie, and an endless array of $100,000 Rolex watches, right? But yet,
Right.
even given the fact that we place almost no focus on fundamental intellectual, scientific, technological progress and waste almost all of our money on ego and status games in the developed world, at any rate, even given this massive societal stupidity we live within, still things are progressing so amazingly fast. And that of course, is just due to the increasing returns, accelerating exponential growth phenomena that Kurzweil and others have talked so much about.
So in a sense, as a civilization, we haven't really been trying. So in a sense, when in the late noughties, you said we'll get to a positive singularity if we really try, and then it ended up being really try, something like that. But the reason why we haven't is because you believe that we haven't been focusing on the bigger problems or
I
the
think
right problems.
that's absolutely the case. And you can see that if you look at specific areas of endeavor. I mean, you're improving, which I keep coming back to. I mean, is there any effort with $100 million focused on that? Absolutely not. I mean, this is a obviously critical area for the progress of science, engineering, and humanity. Mathematics underlies all science and engineering progress, essentially. To the extent we could automate it, we would go much faster. But this is being done by, one or two dozen small academic research groups struggling for funding. And I mean, that's clearly, as a society, we're not trying very hard. I mean, longevity research, finally in the last few years, we're seeing significant funding going into trying to cure aging. And until very recently, pretty much only a handful of researchers struggling for funding were actually trying to cure
So it's
aging.
becoming more likely that it's going to be there for us. Yes.
Yeah, even more for you than for me, man. I turned 50 this year, so
Oh well, well, let's hope that they focus harder. And I'm
yeah.
sure people are going to more really try than they are today.
Well, I think some of us are trying very hard, and 99.9% of the population
They're
are
sharing
not.
Facebook posts about the other people doing it.
Or trying to accumulate more status or more financial resources than the other people around them. I mean, that's we're going to look really silly when our descendants are looking backwards from the singularity. Like, why did you take so long to cure aging and cure material scarcity? Like, instead of focusing resources on nanotech and AGI and brain computer interfacing so that you could just make machines that will manufacture whatever you want, instead of doing that, you spend all your time fighting over the very limited resources being manufactured using the very primitive technologies you had at that time, including resources for completely useless things. I mean, I keep coming back to that because I live in Hong Kong, where half the streets are full of like Rolex watch stores, Louis Vuitton luggage stores, and so forth. I mean, all the resources put into these useless luxury goods, or a say $1,000 bottle of face cream, which probably contains the same ingredients as a $1 bottle of face cream. I mean, all the resources that go into this stuff. I mean, what if this was going into AGI, longevity research, nanotechnology, and the whole thing? Ralph Merkel has been talking for a long time. If I only had $10 or $20 million, I could make a real stab at a Drexlerian molecular assembler. And with all the accomplishments that guy has, I still don't see him launching that huge project, right? And that's that's kind of pathetic if you look at it in the grand sense. I mean, Hugo de Garis and I have been speculating a fair bit and trying to do some calculations about how to do femto technology,
Oh yes, yeah.
how to build machines out of elementary particles. But I mean, society still is just barely jumping at what Eric Drexler showed them in the 80s. Molecular assemblers. One company, Zyvex, is working on that. Almost no one is doing anything toward the vision of arbitrary nanotechnology, being able to assemble anything out of molecules. It's great that nanotech exists as a field. Everyone wants to do something with carbon nanotubes, and you've got synthetic biology and DNA origami, lots of amazing, awesome, mind-blowing stuff. On the other hand, why isn't someone putting $100 billion into building a molecular assembler? I mean, there's a lot to be done there in so many different areas, which is just not being pursued nearly fast enough. So I mean, occasions like Future Day are kind of ironic to me in this way, because the progress each year is astounding. Like, I'm amazed. I look at the news every day, and it reads like science fiction magazines did when I was a kid, right? You look in the news, you're like, okay, autism has been cured in this animal. Mice can now live 35% longer by flushing out senescent cells. Go was beaten. Self-driving cars are now legal on the highway in this state. I mean, one thing after another. science fiction is almost passé now because the news reads like it, right? So it's astounding. On the other hand, you see very clear, very sensible technology projects laid out by visionaries like Eric Drexler, for example, or Rodney Brooks with subsumption robotics, who's now gone in a different direction, largely due to funding issues. I mean, he's still pursuing subsumption, but he's not building little bugs anymore. He's building factory robots. I mean, you have very valid, plausible, brilliant technology projects laid out by visionaries and recognized as promising by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Goes on for decades. Society doesn't fund them, and instead we put our funds into completely worthless pursuits just aimed at gratifying people's egos and animal urges and so forth. So, yeah,
Well, I mean, like if people thought that their animal urges could be supplied, or by the outcome of Drexlerian nanotechnology, or he hates people calling it Drexlerian, or AGI or whatever, then maybe people's priorities would shift a little bit. Like, for instance, okay, you know Shane Legg, who is, I don't know if he's still working for Google now, whether he's still part of the Deepmind project, which I imagine he would be. But you've probably met Demis Habbas, right?
Yeah, I know Demis Hassabis. Yeah.
Yeah, Hassabis. Sorry. No, I mean you must have had some pretty good conversations with these people. Why aren't they, pursuing larger goals, like trying to build an automated theorem prover that understands what it's trying to prove?
I mean, I can't speak for Demis and his attitude now because I haven't talked to him except for very brief exchanges since his company was bought by Google. And I mean, Shane, I know a little better, but honestly, since Google bought their company, I've had a few brief back and forths with him. So I'm not sure how they're thinking about their opportunities right now. But I mean, what I do know from all the AI conversations I had with those guys over the years, I mean, especially Shane, because he used to work for me in the late 1990s and early, but Demis as well. I mean, we had dinner a few times and talked at various conferences. I mean, those guys, especially Demis, are really committed to a deep learning perspective on AGI. And I mean, Demis did a lot of neuroscience as well as AI work. And I mean, he is proceeding under the hypothesis that, deep neural networks combined with reinforcement learning and maybe with a few other bells and whistles, that this is enough to lead to human level AGI. At least that's the point of view he had when we last discussed things. So I mean, if you hold that paradigm that this sort of architecture is enough to get to human level AGI, then what he's doing is probably right. I mean, the idea there would be sort of like, I mean, theorem proving came really late in human evolution, right? So then you get more basic perception and action and learning to work. Then once you have a system that's really smart at more basic stuff, you'll have a system you can teach to do theorem proving. So, I mean, I think those guys are probably proceeding in a very rational way toward AGI according to their own theoretical paradigm. And my own theoretical paradigm and research preferences are a bit different. So I think they're not really looking at the problem in the optimal way, but yet none of us has a proof that we're right about how we're looking at the problem, right? I mean, it's still, in the big picture, AGI is still a fairly early stage research area, and you would expect that different researchers would have different ideas about the best way to go. I mean, just like in physics, you've got string theory, loop quantum gravity, and a whole bunch of other different approaches, right? So, I mean, I think they believe they are attacking the big problem of human level AI in the most rational way they can with the resources at their disposal. And I mean, even though they have a lot of money via Google now, there's a limit to how many people you can manage and how much you can coordinate. So, I mean, it's not like, I mean, I don't know what their own thinking is, but I mean, if I were in their position, I still wouldn't hire like 10,000 people, because how can you coordinate 10,000 people doing meaningful stuff. It's research, right? I mean, it's not just screwing screws into holes or something. So I
What
think
would you spend the money on, Dan?
me, oh, I'd buy you a big mansion first. I mean, and
Awesome.
a
That's obviously, yeah.
better recording studio and some technicians so you can set up calls without any glitches. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely first priority. Yeah, I'm glad you got that one straight. Straight. But what else? I
Um,
mean, yeah.
I mean, if I were extraordinarily wealthy, of course, OpenCog would be my first priority, and that would end up being a far better funded project. And longevity research certainly interests me. Now there's a lot of research going into that anyway, but what I don't see anyone doing is applying AI and proto AGI on a large scale. So we'd see a huge AGI devoted to holistic analysis of all biological data and connected to lab equipment for automatically doing experiments on longevity and other diseases. Now, beyond that, I mean, molecular assemblers would definitely get a lot more love than they're getting at this point. And I think that's that's sort of a lost opportunity. I mean, I think we could be decades ahead of that if people had placed more focus on it. And I would love to see progress on femto technology. I don't know enough experimental physics now to know what is actually realistic to do. So that'd be the kind of thing where you convene a team of experts to brainstorm on whether there's any real way to make progress. I see that as more where nanotech was in 1985 or something. So
Mm, mm.
I would say beyond that, there's so many new ideas coming out now. What you'd like to see is a way to direct money to young people with amazing ideas to do prototyping and theoretical research and so forth. I mean, I would love to be rich enough to offer research fellowships with few strings attached to as many brilliant young or old people as possible. I mean, it's painful to see so many people spend their lives in bullshit jobs or sitting in class in school learning uninteresting, irrelevant things when some of these people actually to learn and create all sorts of amazing new things.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. It's just how to manage them. Do you just pay them to manage themselves? Is that what you're suggesting would be like sort of there's all sorts. You're just fanning money out to all these people who have good ideas and
You
let's
know,
see if they can.
there's a lot of research now that the best way to help the poor, the very poor in rural African villages and so forth,
Hmm,
is just give them money.
hmm,
And I mean that works better. You don't waste a lot on bureaucracy and infrastructure. And, you know, it turns out if you give $1,000 to a poor farmer in rural Ethiopia or Rwanda or somewhere, it turns out by and large these people know how to spend that money better than the social worker would, and they don't usually waste it all on alcohol or gambling or something. They'll like buy a cow for their farm or fix their house or something. And I would suspect the same thing pretty much holds in science and technology funding. Probably some reasonable system that just gave money to people with some reasonable background in science and technology instead of going through the whole rigmarole of research funding. Probably that would ultimately prove more effective and waste a lot less of everybody's time.
hmm. So, okay, what are some of the interesting projects that you're doing at OpenCog at the moment?
Well, with OpenCog, we're really as well as just building out the infrastructure to make the learning and reasoning algorithms better and better. We're focusing on a couple different application areas. I mean, one is longevity biology, and we're using OpenCog to analyze all sorts of genomics data regarding healthy, long-lived people.
Hmm,
And we're using machine learning and also probabilistic reasoning. So we're pulling more and more advanced AI tools into that process. And we're putting together a paper now summarizing some of our research on specifically what makes some people live to 110 instead of merely to 70 or 80. And using AI, we've dug up some interesting patterns there. And then the other thing is robotics. I mean, we're using OpenCog now to control David Hansen's robots. I mean, that's still at the research stage, but it's been quite cool to get, the AI connected to sensors and actuators and have the AI actually in the loop to make these beautiful, realistic robot heads hold a conversation with you. So that's been a major focus. I mean, we're still not there yet, but I was not there yet to having a human level AI system, but we're using that as a sort of playground for integrating various OpenCog techniques. And I was excited in that light to see the new X Prize funded by IBM, which will focus on making a robot or an AI to give a TED talk. I mean, they didn't release the details of the prize, and I mean, as an AI test, I may have some reservations about that. I mean, answering questions about a talk seems like a good AI problem. Giving the talk itself is more about theatrics.
Yeah, that's right.
On the other hand, from a Hanson Robotics / OpenCog perspective, that's cool, right? Because I mean, what Hanson Robotics is doing, what we're doing there is making human-like robots that can stand up at the podium and give a talk. So I think that may end up being a quite interesting venue for us to show off our OpenCog / Hanson Robotics humanoid robot work, where the Hanson stuff takes care of the theatrics and OpenCog takes care of the genuine understanding underlying it.
Awesome. Now about that, those interesting findings you found with your AI longevity sort of analysis. Just a side note, yeah, I am convening a little panel between Orbidegrade Bill Andrews and Liz Parrish. I think it'd be interesting to hear what you'd found, what your AI had found.
Well, I mean, we're waiting to publish that to reveal details, but I can say it is related to the immune system. So seems immune function is a large part of what goes right in people who live to become centenarians rather than just healthy old people.
Okay, yeah, cool. Now, when's that paper coming out, do you think?
I don't know. We have to submit it first. So we're in the process of writing it up now.
So after it's submitted, you'd probably estimate it might take a few months to get some review, and then you'll probably do it, like make some revisions and.
Yeah, it should take a while. I mean, that's how biology goes. In AI, we just open source all our code immediately, but in biology, the culture is a little different, and you kind of if you open your result before you publish it, someone else will just publish it first, and then you don't get any reputation goodies, and we still care about that, unfortunately.
Fair enough. All right. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, it's been fantastic talking to you this year. I hope to do so again really soon. AGI is in Melbourne next year, 2017, and I imagine you'll be down for that. Yeah.
Oh, we've had a long-standing plan to put the AGI conference in Melbourne.
That's right. Yes, that's great. Yeah.
So yeah, I will.
In fact, I initiated those discussions. Do you remember? Yes.
I remember you being involved. Yeah, and my wife has been interested to visit Australia for a while, so that's. I keep asking her to wait until we'll go there for the AGI conference. So.
Oh, you can come around earlier, man. Yeah, I'll show you around. Yeah, but if you do come, make sure you come for over a week if you can spare the time.
Well, for the AGI conference, we will anyhow. So that's.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. This year is in New York, by the way, in July, and it's a mashup, a human level AI conference combining AGI, BICA, neural symbolic and cognitive AI. So four human level AI in one place right after AGI in New York in July. So
Wow, sounds like the place to be. I'd love to be there. It'd be, I'm sure there'd be an awesome opportunity to do a lot of interviews and talk to a lot of really amazing people.
yeah, just hop in
Yeah.
your kayak now. You should be there by July.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have to make it first. I've got some bark just sitting in the backyard. Maybe I can piece that together with some sap and yeah, who knows. All right, man. Well, it's been awesome talking to you again, Ben, and hope to do it again soon.
Yeah. Happy Future Day.
Happy Future Day, and also to all you people out there listening in.
And the
Cheers.
robots. Well, yeah.
Yes, the robots too. Yes, you're included. Okay, thanks, man. Speak soon, yeah?